Let's play a quick word association. When I say the word obedience, what do you think? You probably think of a lot of things. You probably thought of bad authority figures, you thought of leaders, you thought of blind obedience. You can think of all these negative things about obedience. And since you thought about them, you say, since all this bad stuff happens, I shouldn't obey people. When all these bad things are around me, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't obey. And I'm going to ask you something real quick here for help me. Take your baby, pull it out of that dirty bath water, and then toss out the bath water. You're making a huge assumption here, and that is, I don't need to obey any authority figure ever. And now I come here to convince you very quickly that you should be obedient and that you should follow those in authority, whether they're good or bad. Now that's a huge playtime ordering right now. So we're going to start off hitting right away. So who are you obeying? When you choose to obey, who are you obeying? People. People in authority. People who you decided to put above you or are above you by rules of society or work. So there's such things as bad authorities, and we can't help that. Bad authorities happen. And so let me ask you this question. Does one bad apple ruin the whole batch? Does one bad apple ruin the whole batch? Yeah, it does. But does one bad apple ruin your taste in apples? Does one bad apple make it so when you eat it, you're like, oh, I never want to eat this again. I never want to eat apples again, and they should be shunned from society. People don't really eat apples anymore, so I'm going to use pizza. If I made the worst pizza for you, and you ate it, would you be like, man, I never want to eat Little Caesars or Papa John's ever again. I never want to eat those again. No, that's the opposite happens. You're like, I wish I had Papa John's. It's better than this garbage. I wish I had Little Caesars. It tastes good and better than this. And that's what bad authority should do to you. When you look at bad authority, you should say, wow, I really appreciate X, Y, and Z person because they're such good role models and affect me in a positive way that when I obey them, they respect me and I can follow them with confidence. That's what a bad pizza should do. That's what bad authority does. So you should chop off bad authorities in your life because they still affect you. They affect you in ways you don't even know. But then, why do people still obey bad authorities? You can tell when someone's bad. You can tell when someone's poor, lazy, incompetent, or straight up evil and just doesn't do their work. So why do people still obey them? That's a good question. And that's an important question. Why do people do that? Usually, the factors are one of two. They can't help it. You can't help where you're born, what nation your leader is. You can't help what household you're in and how good the parents are. You can't help that the place you love to work has this very bad manager and you can't get along with them. So you have to grit and bear it. You conform to it. Not obey. You conform. Is conformity and obedience the same thing? Is there a difference between conformity and obedience? Yes, there is a difference. So when you hear the word conformity and obedience, you think it instantly in your head, what do you mean they're the same thing? You hear something, you do it. You hear someone say, hey, clean the dishes, you do it. And when Miss Fearing says, hey, you got an art assignment, you hear that, you're like, all right, I'll do that. I'll turn that in. But the difference in conformity and obedience is willingness. The difference is in willingness of you. Consider you and your family lived in North Korea, and say you had very strong anti-government opinions of the North Korean government and of Kim Jong-un. Would you express them? No, you probably wouldn't. And when you ask why, you could say, well, I'll go to prison, I won't see my family anymore, I'll probably die, they'll torture me to the point of near death if they think I'm a part of a wider conspiracy. And what food I have now, I just won't even exist anymore. Or go worse. That is why you choose to conform. You have the ability to disobey. There's no doubt. Everyone has the ability to disobey. But do you have the willingness? Do you have the attitude? No, you kind of just follow along, become a zombie. You kind of blind obedience. You conform. You conform to the people and group around you because you're afraid that the actions you choose to do will have negative costs that will never outride the benefits. So you follow bad authority. And who's responsible then? Who's responsible for the bad things that happen? What do you probably think? What do I mean? When you follow bad authority, who's responsible? If a Nazi soldier just following orders, who's responsible when the Holocaust happened? I'm entering tough waters here for a bit. Was it the government or the person? Who's responsible? Who should have known better? You say, the soldier should have known better. He would have reasoned and known that he shouldn't have done that. He should have been more reasonable. Now, if you just ignored everything I told you about conformity, let me ask you a question. How many of you have pets? How many of you have pets that have a wide mouth that has sharp utensils in it that can really do damage, a lot of damage to your flesh? So when your pet decides to bite somebody, who's responsible? Is it the dog or cat? Surely they should have known better and we're going to find them and sue them and send them off to jail. You wish that happened. Well, no, what happens is you get the responsibility. Why? Because you're the authority. And how you train your dog affects you. Reflects you. And how you teach. Think of children and you think, wow, that child is just crazy, disobedient. Their parents must have raised them wrong. You put the responsibility onto the parents because we doubt the power of conformity and bad authority. We sometimes underestimate how easy it is to fall in, and we think to ourselves, that wouldn't happen to us. But then we do it every day. There are bad authorities that you choose to obey in your life. There are conformities that you choose to follow because it's just easier to go with everybody and hope that it comes out for the best, even though you're bullying, smoking, drinking, whatever you're doing, even just maybe being a mean person. People are contagious, if you haven't known that. And psychologists have found that out with the Milgram and the Asher experiment and even the Stanford prison experiment. When you're in a bubble, it's easy to copy roles. So now we lead to my main caveat. The main thing you're thinking about right now. This sounds great. I would love to obey good authorities. I'm not saying I shouldn't. But what about these bad authorities in my life? How should I handle that? I'm just waiting to get out of here. You have the wrong attitude. And that determines your altitude. Your attitude determines your altitude in your relationships with bad authority. Consider the greatest civil disobediencer as an example of great obedience. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He stood up against bad authority, Bull Connor, and their bad rules of segregation and Jim Crow. Why? Well, they had their rights. They demand them. But did he ever disobey any other laws? Did he ever cause violence? Did he ever cause damage of property, chaos, rioting? Was his protests ever disorganized? No. It was the other people that do that. It was Bull Connor and his goons saying, this can't happen. They're challenging us. They're challenging what we want. So we need to stop it by any means necessary. And they lost that fight. You want to know why Martin Luther King stood up against bad authority? Because he wanted to create an authority he wanted to follow, Have you ever thought about that? He wanted to create a government in place where his children can obey and want to follow that government. He wanted to replace that bad authority out and make it into a good one. And he kept at it. He wanted rules and society that helped his people, but also he wanted people who wanted to be that authority that tells people, yo guys, you gotta do these rules. He wanted to create a government he wanted to follow and believe in. Are you doing that? Are you doing that in your life with your bad authorities, whether they're at home, at school, at work, wherever it may be? Are you saying, I want to challenge you because I want you to be an authority I want to follow? Because I'm going to be here for a while. And if we're going to have this relationship, I want to be obedient. I want to have this willingness to follow instead of a conformity of, this just sucks, I have to work anyway, this isn't going to work, I'm sorry, I'm just going to wait until I'm out. I don't have to work underneath you. What if Martin Luther King had that attitude? What if he asked Bull Connor, yo, can you please stop this segregation? It's not that good. And Bull Connor said no. He did say no. And then Martin Luther King turns to his congregation, turns to his people and say, guys, Bull Connor said no, so we're just going to wait until he dies or just is kicked out of office and hope that a good authority and a better authority figure comes in and does things that we want to, because that would be hugely beneficial to us. So we'll just wait. No. He chose an attitude. He said, we're flying right here right now. We're flying pretty low. So I want to be the change. I want to obey you. There's no doubt I'm rebelling against you right now, but that's because I want you to be an authority figure I want to follow. So come fly with me, Bull Connor. Come fly with me. Come be an authority I would love to obey. What's your attitude right now? Examine your hearts. I want you to look deep down and consider all the people you obey, all the people you dislike. Consider bad authorities. And ask yourself, how am I working towards a solution instead of running away from the problem that I'm a part of too? Martin Luther King kept at it. You know how many protests he did? How many times he kept protesting? How many speeches he gave? All the way up to his death, he kept fighting. He kept wanting to change. And he didn't take no for an answer because he knew that was evil. That was a bad authority. Bad laws. And he wanted to change it to become an authority that he wants to obey. So, never discount obedience or authority. Never let those bad apples ruin your taste or that bad pizza. Be the change and have an attitude where your altitude will be high. Hi, I'm Fearing, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I couldn't find any good TED Talks or videos that talked about obedience in a positive light, so I decided to create my own because I wanted to obey you and I respect you as a good authority figure.